It's been a pretty crazy year, and now that it's coming to an end, I wanted to reflect. And although I try not to have any regrets, I have come up with 10 things about this fragrance hobby that perhaps I would have done differently if I knew then what I know now. Welcome to J-ROYL, everyone. My name is James, and this is a channel about fragrances. Whether or not you have the odd cologne here or there, or you're thinking of collecting fragrances and joining this wonderful community known as the FragCom. Although I warmly welcome my royal family members that have been supporting me for these couple years that I've been doing YouTube, this video is a little more so directed towards the people that are just starting their fragrance collecting. And for those of you who are already knee deep in it, then perhaps you can relate. Number one being Fahrenheit 32. Fahrenheit 32 was one of my notable blind buys gone wrong. It's a fragrance that I solely purchased because the bottle looked cool, but it smelled like garbage. It is the fragrance that gave me puke vibes. Normally with certain blind buy fragrances that I just purchase willy-nilly without trying, I kind of force myself to like it, but I just couldn't with this one. Nuit De L'Homme. Now this is a story that I've told several times on my channel, but when I was relatively new to the idea of collecting, I stocked up on Nuit De L'Homme and I bought 3 bottles of 200 milliliters of Nuit De L'Homme. I used half of one and then sold the rest because it was just way too much Nuit. And now that my collection has grown to the size that it has, I really don't have a need for half a liter. Buying into Aventus batch hype. Aventus by Creed is one of the most popular men's fragrances nowadays. It's said to be the king of men's fragrances. However, there is an entire subcategory of the fragrance community that is devoted to different batches of Aventus. And while I admit I do notice some subtle variations with different bottles of Aventus, I've also noticed variations within the same batch of Aventus, which leads me to believe that the Aventus batch hype is only partially a thing. And I ended up spending quite a bit of money on prolific batches of Aventus that really didn't smell the way that it was advertised. Batches that were supposedly super smoky smoke bombs ended up being very musk pineapple dominant. So in reality, I could have just bought a more contemporary version of Aventus, got the same vibe at way less of a cost. And I also would have saved money because I would only need 1 bottle of Aventus, not 3 or 4. Now I'm not saying Aventus batch people are liars and it's a big facade, but based on my experience, I do regret buying into the batch hype thing, and I'm glad I'm kind of done with it. Completionism. I am a notorious completionist, and although that's technically not a real word, what it means to me is I have a fascination with collecting entire lines of a fragrance. My collection sort of became more about the collecting aspect rather than the fragrance side of things, which I was aware of. I had the self-awareness to know that I was doing that, but it really kind of got old after a while. Most notably, my Mugler collection. I made sure to have every single bottle of Mugler, no matter how expensive my pure malt creation might have been, or my taste of fragrance might have been, or settling for the utter mediocrity of Sun Essence. I wanted them all just to have them. And it feels kind of nice to have every men's Mugler designer release, but then at the end of the day, it kind of loses its luster after a while. And what I'm left with is 5 or 6 fragrances that I'm really digging, and a bunch of others that are kind of put on the back burner. There's no point in me wearing them because I'd rather wear other fragrances within the same line. And part of it is the reviewer side of things. It's nice to have all of them so I can compare them and wear them regularly. But if I were to do it again, maybe I wouldn't have repurchased B-Men. Maybe I would have passed on Icemen. But here we are. My next regret, serial blind buys. A fairly significant portion of my collection were blind buys. And if you don't know the term blind buy in regards to fragrances, it means you buy a fragrance without knowing what it smells like. Maybe you looked up the notes online, maybe you checked some reviews, but you've never smelled it yourself. And there are so many people that do this. I did it a lot, and I didn't even think that much of it while I was doing it. I would always figure, well, I'll buy it, and if I don't like it, then I can just sell it. Now there are a few problems with that, because if you were to resell it, you will almost certainly sell it at a loss because a used bottle is always going to be priced lower than a new bottle. But then you have to factor in the shipping costs or the inconvenience of meeting up with someone and driving out and wasting your time. Time is money after all, so all of that comes into play, and you do get quite a significant loss over time, especially if there's lots of fragrances that you're doing this with. But I think even more dangerous than having to resell fragrances that you don't like is keeping the ones that you're not crazy about. A lot of us will just justify owning it and say, no, it's a good fragrance, but then if you keep track about how often you're wearing that fragrance, or more importantly, not wearing the fragrance, that's when you start stockpiling mediocre fragrances that aren't doing it for you. And you wouldn't have bought that if you tested it properly and actually you maybe smelled it once. My next biggest regret is all of those good deals. Sounds weird, I know. Essentially, if you have a whole bunch of good deals, eventually it becomes one big bad deal. I'm a thrifty guy, and when I see something for a good price or a conceivably good price, it's hard for me to say no, because I always see it as an opportunity to maybe flip it for a profit. A large portion of those good deals weren't necessarily fragrances that I was actively looking for. It was always one that I just convinced myself to get because of the good price. And that's a dangerous thing as well, because those can add up. Even though these fragrances could be as low as half the price of retail. If the original retail price was hundreds and hundreds of dollars, you're still spending a lot of money. And you multiply that over all the times that you do it, you're spending so much money on stuff that you probably won't even be using that much. I've accumulated a lot of bottles of fragrance that were very good deals, but still, my wallet did not appreciate it. Another regret of mine is all the times that I went against my gut. There have been so many fragrances that I liked. I thought they were very interesting and unique and creative, but there was always that little thing deep down that told me, you don't need this fragrance, man. You don't need to buy it. But for whatever reason, I would have tunnel vision and I would just ignore that little voice, that feeling in my stomach, and I would just buy it anyway. And those are the fragrances that I would never wear. They'd be the ones that would be interesting to spray once in a while, but then I would see that I have 100 ml of it that I'm never gonna use in 10 lifetimes. I like to call these fragrances one and done fragrances. Really, really amazing first impressions, but after that, it loses its luster. You need fragrances that you're going to wear in practicality, because that's what fragrances are for. Sure, the bottles look nice and they're interesting once in a while, but be careful when you buy a full bottle, because your intention should be to go through that bottle, not just let it sit there. My next regret is full-size bottles. Whether it's 100 ml bottles or the 4-ounce 120 ml bottles, I regret buying the full-size bottles. This is something that I heard Cody talk about on DracDocs a while ago, saying that he only gets the smaller bottles, the 50 mls. There is a fairly decent justification for buying big bottles because the value is always going to be better if you buy in bulk. But here's the real reality. If you are a collector with more than 20 bottles, 50 bottles, even 100, when are you ever gonna go through one of those bottles? If you have a regular rotation of all these fragrances that you supposedly love, you're gonna be using a couple mil a year, maybe, on each of your fragrances. If I were to do it all over again, I would have opted for the smaller sizes, which would maybe even give me more variety because they take up less space, so I'd be able to fit more in my shelves, but maybe that's just creating a whole other issue. Another regret is not giving cologne houses a fair shot. Unfortunately, when I first started collecting, cologne houses weren't really a big thing, but now there's some really, really good clones out there. Some fantastic companies that are making really good stuff that have caused me to sell or even give away some of my niche alternatives because the clones do what I need them to do. And because I'm a generous dude, I knew someone would appreciate my green Irish tweed, for example, and I just gave it away. If I were to do it all again, I don't know if I would buy all the creeds I have. Maybe I would just have Verbena Fields. Because even if you look at it from a creative standpoint, they're the original, they're the artist who created it. Original Santal, one of my favorite fragrances ever. It's not original at all. It copied Individual, which copied Youp Homme. There's always going to be some overlap, and just because it's the most expensive and the most prestigious It doesn't make it the authority. It doesn't make it the best fragrance. It doesn't make it the most artistic and creative. This is not an industry where the perfumers are in their fragrant cave, ignorant to the world around them. No. You look at trends, you see what's popular, and then you make something kind of similar with maybe your own twist. So everyone's kind of doing it like that. I regret having niche brand loyalty and just being completely ignorant to the other options out there, because really the quality of the less expensive options is going up. It's getting a lot better now. And finally, my biggest regret as a fragrance reviewer, I regret trivializing bad habits and silly decisions. Although I definitely like to have fun and troll, I also don't want to be an enabler. I don't want people to make really rash financial decisions that can burden them just because I add a hashtag YoYaloo on the end. At the end of the day, these are the decisions that I have made. I gotta lay in my bed at night knowing that I've invested a lot of money in this hobby, but that doesn't mean you have to do the same thing as me. I really do want to encourage you guys to take control of your habit. Don't let it control you and become a full-blown addiction where you're buying things willy-nilly just to get that satisfaction of that package in the mail. I know we want to simulate Christmas morning every day, but you also want to make sure you're in charge of your financial situation. You don't want to go into full-blown debt because of a fragrance hobby. It's not cool. But that's all I wanted to say in this video, everyone. 2018 has been a wonderful year for J-ROYL. I want to continually thank you for the continuous support you guys have shown me. And here's to 2019 being an even more badass year for all of us. Thanks for those thumbs, those sweet subs, and your cute comments down below. My name is James, and this has just been my reflection. My self-reflection. If you want to see more J-ROYL content, check out these videos here, here, and here too. Kind of a serious video, guys, but I'll get back to trolling.